I wasn't trying to find anything. I was just looking for an old sweater. It was colder than usual that day in Seattle, and the gray one was the only thing that felt right when the skies turned that kind of overcast. I remembered tossing it into the top shelf of my wife's closet. She once said it made her itchy, so I figured I'd stashed it there and forgot. But instead of the sweater, I found a box, pink, white ribbon, Victoria's Secret. I knew that box. She used to give me gifts in that same kind of box for our anniversaries. My birthday once, too. Inside would be something she planned to wear for me. Intimate, private. No explanations needed. This time, there was no card with my name on it, no sign it was meant for me. Just a small piece of paper, a few handwritten lines. By the second line, my heart had gone completely quiet. She said it wasn't a gift, it was a promise, that she would wear it on that day. What day? No idea. But I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't the one she'd be wearing it for. I stood frozen in our bedroom. Something slipped away from me in that moment, and I didn't even know what to call it. Not pain, not exactly shock either. More like when you're listening to a familiar song, and suddenly one note is off and you can't unhear it. I closed the closet, quietly, like if I didn't disturb anything, maybe it would all go away. I went downstairs, made another cup of coffee even though I already had one that morning. The smell didn't feel the same. I don't remember how long I sat there. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask. I didn't get angry. Honestly, I was just tired. Tired that I didn't see it coming. Tired that some part of me still wanted to believe maybe. Just maybe. I was reading it wrong. But I kept thinking about her eyes lately. The way she spoke to me like I was a background character. The way she hugged me like it was a chore. The way she disappeared into the bathroom faster than usual. And now, the box. I knew enough. Not everything. But enough to understand something had shifted. And maybe it had been shifting for a long time and I just didn't notice. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 45, software engineer by trade. Now a VP of tech over at Vertex Labs in Seattle. Sounds fancy. I know. But mostly it means I manage product teams and make sure things don't fall apart behind the scenes. I'm not the guy who ends up on tech magazine covers. I'm the guy who keeps the servers running while someone else takes the credit. And honestly, I thought I was a decent husband. Not perfect, but present. I didn't forget anniversaries. I didn't hit the bars. I didn't yell at the kids. I could cook a half-decent steak, fix a clogged sink, and I never missed a car service. My wife's name is Vanessa. We met in college. She studied marketing. I was the guy in computer labs pulling all-nighters. Two different worlds. But I remember how she laughed when our professor told the worst jokes and how frustrated she got over probability theory. I cracked a line. She smiled. That was it. We got married young 27. Built everything from a one-bedroom rental in Everett. The early years were tight but full. I was coding. She was working customer support. We'd commute together, split takeout, and she kept a paper ledger of our expenses while I coded a savings tracker just for fun. It wasn't romantic in the movie sense, but it was real. Aiden came when we were 30. Sophie 2 years later. Vanessa stayed home for a while to take care of them. She was a textbook great mom. Dinner on the table. Homework checked. I still remember seeing her once feeding Sophie with one hand and editing a PowerPoint presentation with the other. We bought a place in Bellevue after my first promotion. Not a mansion, but it had a backyard and a small home office. I can still picture that first night pizza boxes on the floor, all of us sitting cross-legged on the empty living room carpet. I remember thinking, maybe this is what happiness looks like. We weren't rich, but we were okay. No fancy vacations. But we took a trip every summer. I thought I was doing everything right. I worked. She managed the house. We were both investing in the same future. I believed in my family. I believed in what we had. I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story. Vanessa went back to work when Sophie started middle school. She said she wanted to do something for herself, not for the money. We were doing fine financially. She said she needed to feel like she still had value beyond just being a mom. I understood. I really did. I'd always respected that, and I figured if I supported her fully, she'd feel the love behind it. She landed a part-time job at an ad agency called Brightwave. Young team, open plan office, flexible hours. You know the type: beanbags, kombucha fridge, people working barefoot by choice. At first, everything seemed fine. She made new friends, became more talkative again. She looked happy, and that made me feel safe. But then, little things started to shift. She started coming home later. At first it was 5, then 6, sometimes close to 7. The reasons were always meetings running late, clients making last-minute changes, or team dinners for bonding. I believed her. Because I wanted to believe her. She also started paying more attention to how she dressed. I didn't mind she looked great, and I was proud. But the loose business shirts became tight dresses. The comfy shoes became heels she once called impractical. I started noticing, even if I didn't say anything. There were other things too. She'd skip the usual morning kiss. She'd hang up phone calls a bit too quickly when I entered the room. I thought of asking, but I held back. I told myself not to be controlling. It's marriage. Everyone has off days. Everyone needs space. Even our sex life changed. We'd always been steady, not scheduled or mechanical, but present. And then it just stopped. I asked. She blamed hormones, age, fatigue. I tried to be understanding. I picked up more housework, took over the school runs, let her rest. One night I wrapped my arms around her in bed. She didn't push me away, but she didn't respond either. Just lay there. Still. Like she was waiting for it to be over. That moment stayed with me. Not because she said no, but because she didn't care. And there was something in her eyes. When she turned away, something cold, distant, like I wasn't even in the room. I used to think my wife was predictable. Turns out, some changes creep in so slowly. You don't even notice until they're already part of the new normal. I found out my wife was cheating on my birthday. There wasn't a photo, no teary confession, just a string of small things that, if you've lived long enough with someone, you begin to notice when they stop fitting together. It all came back to that pink box I'd found earlier, the handwritten note, a promise that she would wear it on that day. I didn't know exactly what day she meant, but as my birthday got closer, I felt increasingly uneasy. Something didn't sit right. Not because I expected that gift honestly, I didn't, but because deep down, I was afraid I wasn't going to get it. 2 days before my birthday, I tried to shift the energy. I bought her flowers, cooked her favorite dish, tried to be more attentive. She didn't resist, but she didn't lean in either. It was like watching someone sit through a movie they weren't interested in, too polite to leave, but not really present. I remember reaching out and lightly touching her wrist while she sat on the couch. She moved, just enough to grab her phone. Didn't push me away. Didn't hold my hand either. The night before my birthday, I couldn't sleep. She was beside me, breathing steadily. Her back turned. I stared at the ceiling, counting the ticking sounds from the wall clock, the one I once suggested replacing with a digital version. But she said the ticking helped her fall asleep. That night, every tick felt like a reminder that I was wide awake in a relationship that had quietly gone to sleep. The next morning, she didn't mention my birthday. No cake, no card, no sign. I told myself maybe she forgot. Maybe she was waiting for the evening. I dropped the kids at school. She left for work like any other day. No hug, no lingering glance. That afternoon, I cooked dinner spaghetti, the way she'd liked it. I even opened a bottle of the wine she'd picked last year. Set candles on the table, even though I felt a bit silly doing it. I asked the kids to dress a little nicer, thinking tonight might be special. She came home around 7. Her eyes scanned the kitchen and she asked, casually, what we were having for dinner. I gave a small smile and told her I'd made something special. She nodded, said nothing more. We ate like it was any other night. The kids chatted. I kept the mood light. When the cake came out, I'd ordered it ahead from a local bakery. The waiter and the kids sang happy birthday. She froze for just a second, then smiled. A thin, polite smile. The kind of smile you'd give to a coworker or your old boss on their birthday, just enough to be appropriate, but completely hollow. That night, I put the kids to bed earlier than usual. They asked why I hadn't opened my gift yet. I gave them a smile and told them I'd do it later. I knew I was lying. And I think they knew something felt off too. I waited in the bedroom for a while. No hurried footsteps. No soft tap at the door. No sign of the pink box. No promise fulfilled. Eventually, she came in holding a grocery bag. She said she'd stopped by the store on the way home because we were out of breakfast food for the morning. She changed into her usual flannel nightgown, not the one from the box. Not anything remotely special. No makeup. No warmth in her eyes. No acknowledgement that it was supposed to be a special day. I asked her quietly, almost to myself, if she planned to give me my birthday gift. She didn't seem surprised. She opened her nightstand drawer and pulled out a small box, wrapped in the leftover balloon paper we'd used for our son's birthday the year before. She handed it to me without another word, then climbed into bed, pulled the blanket over herself, and turned off the light. Just before turning away, she mumbled something. Maybe it was happy birthday, but her voice was so flat, it sounded more like a default setting than a sentiment. I sat there in the dark, holding the box. Inside was a cheap black plastic watch, the kind you grab from a clearance rack at the checkout line without thinking. The green digits blinked as the clock ticked from 11:59 to 12:00. A new day, a different life. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I didn't try to salvage anything. I just knew, in that exact moment, something had shifted beyond repair. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, but because something in my brain had flipped. Like a switch had been thrown. Survival mode. From being the forgotten husband, I began thinking like a man planning his exit, not to escape, but to survive. I stopped feeling. I started calculating. I began thinking in terms of leverage. What I had. What she didn't know. What I could still control. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: agency. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, toasted the bread, pulled her favorite yogurt from the fridge. When she came downstairs, she thanked me in the usual autopilot tone. I smiled like I always did, not out of habit, this time out of strategy. If she could play a role, so could I. I wasn't in her script anymore. I had started writing my own. I started with the money. I canceled our auto deposits, stopped funding the retirement account. I opened a set of personal expense streams that were legally clean but difficult to trace. Everything still above board, just messy enough to keep questions away. I enrolled in an executive MBA program at a private university nearby. The tuition alone could have bought us a second property. But I didn't care. It was legitimate on paper and useful in practice. I needed skills, just in case. I bought a new SUV, the kind I used to mock as overkill for families like ours. I wasn't trying to be practical anymore. I was making moves. I picked up a new laptop, phone, and smartwatch. It looked like I was trying to relive my 30s. But in my mind, everything was spreadsheeted. She saw the changes. She didn't ask questions. Maybe she thought I was going through a midlife spiral. Maybe she felt guilty. Most likely, she just didn't care. But I did. I hired a private investigator, a guy recommended by a former coworker, someone with experience in corporate infidelity and finance cases. I didn't need minute-by-minute footage. I just wanted accuracy. I needed to know who, when, where. Was money involved? Gifts, hotel receipts? I wanted the entire story. Quietly, legally. 3 weeks later, I had my first report. Photos of her walking into a hotel with Ryan Chambers, her direct supervisor. Long coat, high heels, face distracted, phone clutched tightly. Didn't look like a team meeting. Looked like a habit. A week later, she was spotted having dinner with someone else, a major client of her agency. 2 entrees. A bottle of red wine, the kind she once said was for special nights only. Then both entered the same elevator. 3 months. 6 different men. A few co-workers. A few business partners. One had financial transactions linked to her labeled as off-hour consulting fees. I wasn't shocked. I didn't slam the desk. I just sat there. It wasn't pain. It was quiet. Heavy. Like I'd waited so long for this confirmation that when it finally arrived, all I had left was recognition. No denial. No begging. Just a long exhale. I bought a fireproof safe and placed it in the garage. Inside, I organized everything: photos, statements, logs, timestamps, recovered messages I'd paid someone to extract from old backups. Each document labeled, indexed by month, name, location. Each folder felt like a brick I was stacking between us, not out of rage, but out of clarity. On the outside, I played my part. Still took the kids to school. Still asked her how work was. Still said goodnight. Still did the weekend grocery runs. She responded as usual, sometimes smiling, sometimes tired. Always distant. But I saw it now, how she lived 2 lives. And so did I. The difference, I knew exactly where mine was headed. I don't remember which day of the week she asked for the divorce, but I remember her face when she said it. There was no regret, no anger, just a strange kind of relief. She didn't know I saw that, and she definitely didn't know I had been waiting for that moment. I didn't ask questions. I didn't push back. I simply nodded, letting her believe this would be easy. She had no idea that the man sitting in front of her was no longer her husband, but someone who had been quietly preparing for a war she had no way of winning. I met with my attorney that same week. I brought everything: bank records, surveillance photos, investigation logs, 2 months of compiled evidence. He was a cautious man, a little skeptical at first, probably thrown off by how organized I was. But after a few minutes flipping through the documents, he sat upright and started highlighting. He explained that while we lived in a no-fault divorce state, proof of infidelity could still carry weight, especially when combined with public image and company reputation. I understood. I had no plans to keep this private. My counterfiling was done quietly. I requested divorce on the grounds of adultery, supported by hard evidence. I petitioned for full custody of the children. For the past 2 years, I had been their primary caregiver, handling school runs, meals, homework, doctor visits. I submitted medical records, schedules, photos of family outings, all without their mother present. I requested to keep the house, explaining it was the most stable environment for our children, especially given that I had stepped away from my career to raise them full-time. While I had once been the main breadwinner, I had chosen to take a step back to be present, and I made it clear that any financial arrangements going forward should reflect our current reality, not just our past income. I wasn't asking her for support, but I wasn't about to be painted as someone irresponsible when I had been the only consistent parent in their lives. Then, I went a step further. I filed a civil suit against her company Brightwave on grounds of gross negligence for allowing an inappropriate relationship between management and staff to fester, resulting in damage to my family. I didn't expect to win. I didn't need to. I just needed to make noise. I sent copies of the investigator's report to her parents and to Ryan Chambers' largest potential acquisition partner, one I knew was deep into due diligence talks. Within 2 weeks, Brightwave received complaints from multiple sources. Online threads began circulating about a married female employee sleeping with her boss. Ryan was placed on temporary leave. 1 week later, he quietly exited the company, citing personal pressure. As for her, the shock took time. I don't think she realized how far things had slipped out of her hands. When the divorce papers were served, she didn't react. No tears, no anger, just a blank stare. But I recognized that look. I'd worn it before, only I had time to get up. She hadn't. That weekend, I took the kids camping. When we returned, the house looked the same, but she sat quietly in the living room, no wedding ring on her hand. I didn't speak. I took the kids upstairs, then went straight to the kitchen. I grabbed a beer, heard her whisper something behind me. Maybe it was a warning, maybe a plea, maybe just a question. I didn't respond. I had crossed a line where being a husband no longer mattered. I wasn't there to argue or punish. I was just there to finish this legally, calmly, and on my terms. The final ruling came on a quiet spring morning. I remember it clearly because the sun was out, a kind of light that felt calm but firm, much like how I felt inside as the judge read out each decision. I was granted full custody of the children. She was given visitation rights on a fixed schedule, but no overnights. The house was awarded to me and the kids. The court did not require me to pay spousal support, as I had been the sole provider for the past 2 years. My civil suit against her company didn't result in a full victory, but it applied enough pressure to push them into a settlement. The compensation wasn't huge, but it was enough to ensure they wouldn't make the same mistake again. I walked out of that courtroom with empty hands, no hugs, no documents, no goodbye from the woman who had once been my wife. But my kids were with me. And I knew, from that moment on, everything I did would no longer come from pain, but from the one thing I still had left their future. I didn't date. I didn't open up. I had no interest in starting over. The only thing I was sure of was that I needed to be fully present for my children. They had already lost the version of their mother they once knew. I wasn't going to let them lose their father, too. Every day, I got up early, made breakfast, checked homework, drove them to school, cooked dinner, and listened to them talk about their classes and friends. I tried not to let my eyes show too much sadness when I looked at them. I also tried not to let myself flinch every time I unconsciously searched for another presence at the dinner table that was no longer there. It took me a long time to truly understand what had pushed Vanessa so far. It wasn't just one affair. It was a series of small choices, each one pulling her further from who she used to be. While I was trying to hold the family together, she was trying to find herself again. The tragedy is that the way she went about it betrayed everything that once made her beautiful in my eyes. She didn't leave me for another man. She left because she no longer felt like herself. After nearly 2 decades spent as a mother, a wife, a background figure, she began to feel like a faded silhouette in the family portrait. Going back to work wasn't just about restarting a career, it was about reclaiming something she believed she had lost: the feeling of being noticed, wanted, chosen. Ryan the First didn't seduce her with charm, but with a gaze that made her feel like she still mattered. That feeling, it turned out, was more addictive than she expected. I didn't learn any of this because she confessed. I learned it after many nights reading old text messages I had saved for legal reasons. Not to torture myself, but to understand. Between the dinner dates and the wire transfers, I found moments of vulnerability, where she sought validation more than desire. And that, more than any image or message, is what hurt the most. She wasn't a promiscuous woman. She was someone lost. Someone who never found her way back. That was one kind of heartbreak. But then came another, the kind you feel as a father. I never shared any of this with the kids. But even without hearing it from me, I knew they were beginning to understand it in their own way. Aiden picked up on it first, not the facts, but the feeling. He grew quiet, spent more time alone, and avoided any topic remotely connected to his mother. When I tried to ask how he was doing, he would just shake his head. I remember once seeing him delete a missed call from her without even opening it. It wasn't out of hate. It was because she no longer felt like someone worth holding on to. Sophie reacted differently. She didn't lash out, but there was something in her eyes, something heavy, far too grown up for a girl her age. One day, she asked me if her mom ever felt regret. I didn't answer. Any answer would have hurt her. Later that week, she sent her mom a message, just one. I only saw it because she left her phone on the kitchen counter. It read, "I don't hate you. I just don't know what to call you anymore." I'm not sure if Vanessa ever replied, but from that day on, Sophie never brought her up again. There were no tears, no screaming, no broken dishes, but in both of their eyes, I saw something I now recognize clearly: disappointment, not at the fact that their mother had cheated, but that she was no longer a safe place to return to. Though I no longer worked a corporate job, I kept learning. The MBA program I'd enrolled in hadn't just been a way to spend money, it became a bridge that helped me re-enter a tech world evolving faster than ever. I studied new platforms, spent hours every night learning about AI, software integration, and SaaS models. I had no dream of becoming a hotshot CEO. I just wanted to create something of my own, something no one could take away. A year later, I launched a startup, quietly, like everything else I'd done since the divorce. It was a simple integration tool for small business platforms, efficient, straightforward, nothing flashy. I eventually sold it to Vertex Labs, my former company, for a price that meant I wouldn't have to worry about money for a while. They offered me a consultancy role. I turned down any fancy titles and took a flexible contract instead, just so I could keep my time with the kids. We moved to a smaller, quieter house, farther from the city. I hired an older woman part-time to help watch over the kids, not to replace me, but to be there when I had to step away. Her name was Marlene Jensen, a widowed former elementary school teacher. She wasn't overly affectionate, but there was something warm and honest about her. The kids grew to love her. I did too, in a quiet way. Some evenings, after they were asleep, we'd sit out on the porch, each with a cup of tea, barely speaking, just enough to remind me I wasn't entirely alone. 13 years had passed since I officially became a single father. Sophie had just started middle school back then, still prone to forgetting her lunchbox in the morning rush to catch the bus. And now, there she was wearing a wedding dress, smiling softly as she held the hand of the man who would share the next part of her life. The ceremony was held on an autumn afternoon in a small garden in Portland. She and her fiancé had picked every flower and every strand of lights themselves. It wasn't fancy or elaborate, just warm, personal, and private enough for her to feel safe on a day that mattered. I arrived early, as always, helping my nieces and nephews set up chairs. Aiden had flown in from California the day before. Still the same quiet, steady, hands always working. That morning, I didn't think too much about seeing Vanessa again. Of course she had been invited. I didn't interfere with Sophie's decision. I simply told her, "You can invite whoever you want. I'll be there. And I won't let anything ruin your day." Vanessa showed up right on time. She came alone, wore a plain beige dress, minimal makeup, hair tied up neatly. She looked very different from how I remembered her, like someone who had worked hard to erase any trace of the past, just to be able to stand here without drawing too much attention. She sat quietly near the back, away from the family section. In her lap was an old photo album, carefully wrapped in a gray silk cloth. I didn't approach. I didn't stare. I didn't avoid her either. But I didn't look for a reason to speak. During the ceremony, there was a brief moment when our eyes met. There was no blame, no longing, just two people who had once known each other too well and now understood how to keep their distance. Through the entire reception, Vanessa stayed in place. No wine, no dramatic toasts, nothing that would make Sophie uncomfortable. When our daughter cut the cake, I saw Vanessa's eyes begin to water, but she wiped them quickly, as if determined not to let anyone notice she still felt anything at all. There were no group photos with her. We didn't stand within 10 feet of each other. I almost forgot she was even there until the end, when the guests had mostly left, and I saw her waiting quietly by the side of the road, holding that album in both arms, waiting for a ride. Under the soft amber streetlight, I noticed a slim gold ring on her left hand. Not a wedding ring, just a plain band with a tiny stone. I walked over, not to speak, just to get a better look at the ring. I stood next to her for a few seconds without saying anything. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying the smell of damp grass and the chill of an early winter evening. She held the photo album close to her chest, her eyes fixed on the pavement. I looked at the ring one last time and was about to turn away when she spoke. The first thing she said after 13 years wasn't really a sentence, just a breath shaky and hoarse, like her voice had gone unused for far too long. Then she said she had once hoped for a chance to apologize, not to rekindle anything, just to finally say what should have been said a long time ago. I didn't respond. No nod, no shake of the head. I simply stood there, letting her speak. She said there were nights she couldn't sleep, remembering those evenings when we'd all sit down to eat spaghetti in the kitchen, where I used to sing old songs while cooking. She told me that the day I stopped asking her if she was okay was the day she knew she had been pushed out of the family and realized she was the one who had done the pushing. I still said nothing. I couldn't even tell if what I was feeling was forgiveness or something else. It just felt like listening to a stranger recount a dream I had once lived inside. She asked if I ever thought about the early days, the morning train rides, the tiny apartments, the dinners of instant noodles under soft yellow lights. I had, but not in the way she might have hoped. She lowered her head and said she didn't expect anything from me anymore. Only that, maybe someday, the kids might see her as someone who had at least tried to make things right, even if it would never be enough. I looked at her for a long moment, then replied with a voice much softer than I expected. I told her I had forgiven her a long time ago, not because she had earned it, but because I couldn't carry that anger through the rest of my life. But forgiveness didn't mean there was anything left between us. No affection, no relationship, no promises, not even the smallest thread. She stood still for a long while, then gave a small nod, like she had known that already, but only now had the strength to accept it. When her car arrived, she opened the door and stepped in without looking back. I didn't watch her leave. I just pulled out my phone and sent a message to Sophie. The wedding was beautiful, and I'm so proud of you. That was the last time I saw Vanessa, not because of bitterness, but because that was enough.